Sat Sri Akal. Welcome to the Punjabi Pod, episode 12. We're back with Dr. Sandhu and our partnership with Pchs, Ranjodh. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me back.
How's everybody's weeks going?
Good.
Yeah?
So far so good. Yeah.
It's going pretty good, yeah.
So we've had a couple weeks in between our talk, and one of the things I'm seeing a lot right now in the community, and you tell me, what you've seen, but I'm seeing a lot of, what in Punjabi we call kabrat, anxiety. And people coin that term. I mean, they use that term very sort of loosely around a lot of different feelings. So I thought maybe we could kind of dabble in that today and just sort of understand. I mean, it would be good to understand what that is, what happens to the brain and the body, right, biochemically, but also have you speak to a little bit of the symptoms and then what we could do around it. Because I feel like one thing we need to give our community is better skills around this particular thing. What do you think?
I think that's really good. I think that there are a lot of feelings that get mislabeled as anxiety.
Yes.
And I think that it's become a bit of a catchphrase.
Yeah.
It seems like everyone you talk to these days
is anxious.
Yeah. Or has anxiety, right? Yeah. You turn on the television, you see actors, they're always saying they have anxiety. Or you go out, you talk to somebody, they're like, oh my God, I'm so anxious. Everybody talks about anxiety.
I know.
I think it's turned into such a catchphrase that a lot of people don't even really know what exactly anxiety is.
Yeah. So tell me in your terms what it means to you in your world, even professionally, like when you deal with clients or you're with your background.
I think anxiety for me is ego. And
that's interesting.
And what I would say is, I'm not even sure if ego is the right word. I think Sigmund Freud actually meant to call it the id, but because ego sounds better, I think that's the word that we end up using in society. I think it's your ego. I think it's generally your self-creation of who you are. And what I mean by that is, it's like we end up creating a narrative or an image, or we start taking on identities.
Okay.
And that becomes a part of who we are. If anything happens that moves us outside of that identity, we become anxious.
We become nervous.
Or nervous.
Yeah.
Nervous, or we become unnerved.
Yeah.
And I think a majority of us, like for example, you're a doctor, and that's become a label.
Yeah.
That has become your identity. Mm-hmm. For an example, if I don't think this will ever happen, if someone ever challenged you to take away your license or try to take away your doctorship.
Sure.
Right? That would be
it's very
anxiety provoking.
Oh, yes.
For sure, because it's changing your identity.
Yeah.
Right?
That's true.
So your identity is changing. So anything that pushes you to the edge of your bubble, and I like to call ego as a bubble. Right? So anything that pushes me to the corner of my bubble that makes me feel uncomfortable, that is what most people label as anxiety.
Well, it's true. It's interesting. If somebody asks me to do something in the community that's a little different than what I'm used to, that there is that feeling of, I'm going outside my bubble, right? Because it's not just doctoring, it's something else, right? And then that's not my comfort zone, right?
100%. And
comfort zone, yeah.
Comfort zone is very important because I think the way that our society has been structured, from a very early age, from nursery school to grade school, through middle school, through high school, through university, or if you start working right away, I think the main message we receive is that it's important to be comfortable.
Yeah.
Right? I don't think much has been done to tell us how not to be comfortable.
Yeah, true.
I think it's important to be comfortable, and I think a lot of people nowadays are not having the skills to be adaptable to when things change. Or for an example, even on my drive here today, I was hoping to get here at a certain time.
Yeah.
My previous appointment went longer than I had anticipated.
Right.
And then me driving here, I noticed there was a lot of traffic. Even though I put on the screen on my vehicle, I could see there's going to be traffic, and it said there's going to be stop and go traffic. The first thing I do is, rather than accepting that, I'm cursing, I'm swearing, I'm losing my stuff, right?
Yeah.
Right? I'm losing my lunch over this. I'm like, this is terrible. I can't believe this is happening, right?
No, it means you're very punctual. That's good for us.
No, I think it's good. It's good to be
Right.
punctual.
But it's your reaction.
My reaction to that,
Yeah.
right? I got activated. And some people call it
Yes.
triggered. I got
Triggered,
activated.
yeah.
I don't like the word triggered, and I'll explain that in a bit too. I got activated by the fact that I'm coming here. I made a commitment, and the identity that I have created for myself is that I am a punctual person when I see you guys, right? So the narrative, what the story I've written with everyone here at the Punjabi Pod is, I am a punctual person.
Yeah.
And not being punctual broke that narrative. So all of a sudden, I am freaking out by the fact that I am not following the narrative that I have created.
Needing that, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? So a lot of things happen when think about our identities is that our identities, when they're challenged, that is one of the things that causes us to become anxious, almost or nervous. You
Yeah.
know? So we have a situation, and that was my image that I've created. If anything upsets that image, I become anxious. That's one of the reasons when we start labeling messages like, you're a great doctor, and all of a sudden you hear that every day, you're a great doctor, you're a great doctor, and one person comes to you and says, you're okay, it's going to be, what do you mean? That's not my identity.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think is because you got comfortable with the original narrative that you're a good doctor. And I think that's when some people can become uncomfortable with a certain narrative. That is the main thing that causes a lot of anxiety. And I think anxiety, or I can call that being uncomfortable. But I think if you get anxiety, it's almost like become super nervous. You become so attached to your identity that anything that shakes that makes you nervous.
Do you think, that's interesting. I want to extrapolate that into our homes, because that's where the applicability of it comes in for our families and our community. Do you think that in terms of, like, I go back to when, as kids, we were kids, and what that, like, a lot of kids growing up these days, maybe not just specific to our culture actually, or our society, but in general, I find, like you said, it's a term that's just thrown around very loosely now. You have young kids, 10, 12, 13 years old, coming out of I see them in my practice. You know, I feel very uncomfortable. Something's going on with me. And parents help kids identify the feeling as anxiety, right? And I mean, we're putting younger and younger kids on anti-anxiety medication, which are antidepressants, right? And I wonder if there's some dialogue within our families that leads to that or creates that. Do you think there's something in the structures of these homes that might be creating this, not necessarily like anxiety culture, but I don't know, or maybe it's just the world we live in today, right? Or is it the influence of social media where people are always comparing themselves and trying to meet expectations, right?
I actually think that nowadays parents are incredibly busy, and I'm not a parent.
Right.
And I will make that disclaimer because somebody may critique me and say, when he's not a parent, he's giving out parental advice, right?
You can. It's okay.
Right. One thing I've observed, and I remember, like, and I'll use Dr. Gabor Mate in one of his talks. He spoke about the fact that parents nowadays, they're so busy.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, I was very fortunate. Mm-hmm. I had my mom at home for a big chunk of my childhood.
Yeah, so did we.
Right?
Yeah.
So my mom was home. My mom was able to provide me with quality time, undivided time when there was no other distractions going on. So for an example, I would go to school in the morning. My mom would have time, 2-3 hours, to get the house in order, clean up, and make sure everything's vacuumed, mopped, sanitized. So we didn't have to clean on the weekends or didn't have to clean after school, right? So in that time when I came home for lunch, my mom would always have a freshly cooked lunch available for me, available on the lunch table.
Yeah.
My mom would sit down and talk to me when I had that. My mom would ask me how my day's been so far in school. You know, allowed me to kind of express bigger feelings that I had in the first part of my school.
You don't see that these days.
You don't see that these days at all, right?
No.
The reason being is, I think and I'll even make this a critique of even capitalism in itself, you got two parents who are working. And I think that our society has become very career obsessed. Like, it's like, it's not so much about like who you are or what type of person you are. It's about what you do. If you go to social functions, one of the very first questions I always get asked is, what do you do? I don't even get asked, how are you doing?
It's always,
what do you do? Like, it turns into like a comparative competition, right?
What you do.
No, we've talked about that, especially within our community.
Yeah.
That competitiveness.
100%. Like, I got to show that I'm successful. So success in our community isn't defined as being, wow, you stayed at home and you spend a lot of time with your children. That's not considered successful.
I know.
Right? What's considered successful in our community is somebody who makes a lot of money, somebody who has a nice car, somebody who is nice house,
yeah.
somebody who has a great education and who has his great career, as a respectable career.
Yeah.
That is what people compare themselves to, right? So you have both mom and dad working nowadays, and I think that started happening more. The
more
trend.
Anxiety in kids.
It definitely is, right?
Yeah, because they're not having that support.
Yeah, the support is mom and dad being there for the kids when the kids come home, right? Even when the kids come home in the evening. This is not a critique against parents either, because parents are swamped as well too.
I know.
Parents are doing the best they can, and I think that a lot of parents that I've observed will come home and give their kids the technology, and they sit in front of their tablets. They might get the cell phone for a while. Mom might go into the kitchen, start cooking,
yeah.
right? She doesn't have the time to go, because when I was younger, my mom had supper already cooked already when I was in school.
I was just going to say,
Right?
it's already ready to go.
It's ready to go. So
she's hands-on with you.
Yeah, definitely. So that's why my mom would teach me how to set the table, or how a table is to put out, right? Or how to present the food. It was lessons that I got when I was in elementary school and in junior high, for the most part. Because my mom worked part-time in junior high. So there were times when mom was home. So lunch or supper was already done. So I had an opportunity to see how to set it up. And all it was just warming up the meal and putting it into the plates, and we ate.
That's what we did too.
Right?
I was just thinking about the tomato soup bowl.
All we did is put the microwave on.
Our
press
mom
the start button.
would literally put the time on the microwave, and we used to walk in the door because our parents were at work all the time.
Yeah.
We had grandparents.
Press start.
And we just literally, it was 3 minutes on the soup, and we just hit start. Like the time was already on the microwave, we just hit start.
Wow.
But yeah, very similar.
Those
like just
sandwiches
having,
are so good.
Just having somebody,
everything already ready.
I think that's important, right? I think, but one thing is, again, is that in those moments, my mom was able to work with me to go and look at my homework, and was able to ask me how my school day went, was able to sit down even after school and watch Batman or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with me on TV after school, right? And there was an opportunity for me to kind of decompress my day and to share it with a safe adult. Kids don't have that same luxury today. We have multiple earning households. Parents are busy. It seems that things have gotten really, really expensive, right? If you talk about inflation nowadays,
100%.
People are running the rat race. They're trying to pay off houses which might have been $150,000 20, 30 years ago are now $500,000, $600,000, right?
Yeah.
So income hasn't gone up for parents, right? Income, the price of food has definitely gone up, right?
Yeah.
Cost of living is through the roof.
It's through the roof.
Right? And I think this all contributes to anxiety. People, if you look at the economics, they can't keep up, right?
Can't keep up.
So you're running all the time. Parents are running. So parents are looking at kids like, okay, I'm raising my kid.
But
I can't be bothered.
Yeah.
I can't be bothered right now.
It's like a checklist almost, because I was driving around today and I just noticed people in the cars beside me. And again, this is just purely based on how they looked, but they just looked down. And then I thought about like what parents are doing these days when they have these $500,000+ houses, and then the upkeep of them, then the cost of their kids generally, their own life expenses, then they have the cars that they should be buying.
Yeah.
I'm like, no wonder they have to have a 2-income household.
Yeah.
And then the stress that puts on the parents. It's like you're continuing this cycle of having to work, having to make more to fund this house.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, if you're like a professional making 6 figures, I say, you don't even deal with that stuff.
Right.
You're just like,
Whatever.
I bought a $800,000 house, done, finished, by Tesla, whatever. It doesn't even like phase them.
It doesn't phase
but
them.
The vast majority of our society isn't those 6-figure people. It's 2-income households, and it's a rat race. And they just seem like so bogged down
By it. And I think, I think you're right. Like I was actually talking to Simi the other day about downsizing because, house-wise, you just sort of say to yourself, like, do I want to be in this rat race? But, and I wonder.
I want to stop you there for a second. Even if you downsize, the house you downsize to is going to be just as expensive.
That's what we were talking about.
As the house you have right now, right?
Because the interest rates have just gone up.
So
what's the point?
Half the square footage, but I'm paying more. Huh.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense, right?
See?
So essentially speaking is that everything has gone up in price.
It's insane.
That's what I'm talking about. Even a $150,000 house 10, 20, 30 years ago is now worth $500,000, $600,000. So if you buy a $150,000 house today, that house might have been $10,000, $20,000. And then most times you're purchasing homes in neighborhoods which you're not feeling very comfortable in,
see,
right?
Yeah.
And then
100%.
there's other issues that come in being in those neighborhoods, such
School
as like
systems,
crime, like poor infrastructure on the streets, right? And let's be honest, we do live in a class-based society where people who are not in a privileged socioeconomic class, they end up living in homes with crumbling infrastructure on the streets. You have crumbling school systems, and that's not the areas or the places you want to place your kids.
I know.
Majority of us want to place kids in homes which they're doing really well infrastructure wise, and we want to place them in schools, good schools, so that kid can go and be educated and have a better future for him or herself.
Do you think these homes and these families can carve? Like I've told this to Simi before, like I literally have to make sure like I carve time out. Like I have the luxury, I would say, or the flexibility to be like, I'm not seeing patients after 3:30 today. I did this on Monday. I'm going to pick my kid up early. We went to the mall. We spent some time together. My phone was on silent. I gave her that time.
She must have just been in heaven.
Oh yeah, she loved it. And we do that often. Because it's a very conscious decision. I have to look at my planner and be like, okay, this day I'm here and I can do this, right? But
it's effort. You have to take that effort.
So, but you're right. We're in the rat race, and so I have to literally every week. I did it this morning actually because I couldn't do it yesterday. So one of my mornings of the week has to be this. Okay, when can I do this with my kid? But I have to make a conscious effort to carve that time out. I wonder, and again, I'm saying this is maybe I'm lucky. It's a luxury for me, because I'm not as much a part of that rat race because of my profession. But if you look at more of the sort of labor job, whatever, I don't know, 8-hour day, however
blue collar
it is.
Almost, yeah.
That blue collar,
I guess,
maybe piece, like how those families that might be a challenge for them.
I think it's also a challenge for white collar families. I would say that
because the reverse is true.
The reverse is true, right? Like, let's say if you're in the financial industry and you're an accountant, for an example, or a lawyer, and then there's a deadline that comes up that you have to fight a case, or there's a major client that wants their books cooked. Not on the cooking books. I think it's kind of illegal, but they want their books put in order, right?
Yeah.
Right. But they want these deadlines to happen, and I think a lot of employers put these deadlines on their employees.
Sure.
Employees end up spending 12, 13, 14 hours at the office. They might end up spending longer hours being a lawyer, and you're lucky you're a doctor that has her own practice. But if you're a doctor on call or on rotation, you might be with a patient for 4, 5, 6, 7, 12, 13 hours. Who knows, right? A
quick trip to the hospital on call turns into a 12-hour surgery.
It could definitely be, right?
I know people, my colleagues. I know
definitely do that, right? Yeah. So here we are. We're in a society. Parents are incredibly busy. So the kids naturally would become anxious if you think about it. They're like, oh, I have nobody to talk my feelings with.
Like
I have nobody to process with.
Yeah, what did you say once about
a vertical versus horizontal attachment, right?
Vertical, horizontal. I really like that analogy because you're right.
Definitely.
You don't have anybody, your friends are raising you.
If friends don't understand their own feelings either, right? So now here I am. I've experienced a big moment at school. I come home, I'm carrying this with me. Who am I going to talk to this about? Who will I unpack this with? Mom and dad are incredibly busy, right? Mom and dad are doing their best. There is no doubt about it. Mom and dad I realize I have little Binder over there. Binder is sad. Binder is going nuts about like, I could tell something's wrong with Binder. I don't have the time to sit there to figure out what is making Binder sad, right? Rather than saying, hey Binder, like if I had hours in the evening, I could sit with Binder and ask Binder like what happened, like what's going on with him. I'll say, don't worry about it, man. Stuff happens. Forget about it and you move on. I think a lot of parents would default to that because they don't necessarily have the time to go to Binder and say, let's sit down, let's have a discussion about this.
But see, that's the thing. I find what could be more important in that moment than unpacking that kid's feelings? Nothing.
But
Nothing.
I think Punjabi parents, you know what Punjabi parents do though, some of them?
They squash.
They're just like, chalo kuch nahi hunda.
Yeah.
Chalo kuch nahi hunda, chalo yaar idda te kam hunde rehinde hai.
Kam chalde rehinde.
Chalde rehinde hai. And the kid's just like, okay, nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. And then they just get up the next day and carry on.
I find it really interesting. Like, again, we came from a household, and maybe that's why you sort of have to be the one, like the sort of cycle of change, right? Like, this happens in my home. It happens, and I'll be in the kitchen and she'll say something and I will stop what I'm doing, turn the stove down and walk over there and sit with her. Because I think to myself,
that's amazing.
But what could be more important, right? In that moment, your kid is having a moment. Binder, for example.
Yeah.
So what could be more important than Binder? But that's what I think we need to teach our families. Like,
I think the families intrinsically know these things.
Yeah,
they know.
Want to act on it?
No, I think they're unable to act on it based on a time crunch. And
so interesting.
I think when Gabber, when I heard him speak, or Dr. Mattei, when I heard him speak,
I've seen that one.
He did say that nowadays they've done a qualitative study. The parents typically have about 15 quality minutes with their kids, if that, every evening.
That's crazy.
From Monday to Friday. Otherwise, there's a lot of stuff that keeps them busy. I also think nowadays kids they're overbooked in a lot of activities as well too. I know. Right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with going out and being in activities like art and sports.
Yeah, but there's too many though.
Too many, yeah.
Swimming, piano. I mean, come on. Swimming, piano, badminton, the kid's not gonna play any of those sports, FYI.
Yeah.
Like
basketball.
I have some friends that
yeah.
their kids playing like 4 sports.
No.
I'm like,
every night of the week can't be something. Like even now, we just finished hockey and Bhangra, I was gonna wait, and I says, no, we're gonna wait to start. I want a month of just
nothing.
No hockey, no Bhangra. Just let's relax. Let's let spring start, and it gives them that sense of, because my daughter asked me, and I says, we're just gonna wait. Because it gives them that sense of being able to just come home, relax. You're not running from school to hockey practice. And it ends up being a lot. But I think that, again, comes down to that sort of juggling. That parental time juggle. You have to be able to look at your life and say, well, this needs to go. Or I can't commit to that. Again, I think I have the luxury of that because I'm in private practice. And the groups that I do work with, where there's more of a call schedule, I have some flexibility. But I don't think that that's the case for the norm.
No, not for the majority. You're in a very privileged position.
I know.
And I think I think that a lot of parents are not in the same privileged position. Like even if the mom got home from work before the dad, or the dad got home before the mom, the focus is on meal prep, right? The focus is on making sure the kids are ready to go to their next activity or what's happening next, right? I also think one of the more interesting, so this might even sound a little bit contradictory, is when I used to come home, there used to be an opportunity for me to quickly check in on the mom. I got an opportunity to grab my hockey stick and go down the street to one of my best friend's houses and play street hockey all evening. All right? It didn't seem as if, I don't see kids nowadays playing street hockey.
We talked about that.
Right?
This doesn't exist.
I don't see street hockey. I don't see any kids playing hardly any sports on the road anymore. Like,
you used to have like people setting up nets and then moving the nets.
Yeah.
Cars would come. That's how it used to be. Like now you have like maybe 1 or 2 people in their own driveway, but there's not like a community there. It's just like single household, brother, sister, or brother, or single child, whatever it is.
It's that.
You don't see that.
I also think there's a lot of fear that parents instill in their kids about like, don't go out. There could be stranger danger. I think we've been trained to think that there's a lot of strangers in society that are out to get us. And I think a lot of people
I think as parents, we are nervous about that.
And I do think a lot of parents like, I'm not a parent, and I hope when I become a parent that I don't bubble wrap my kids either.
Yeah.
But there seems like a lot of kids are just bubble wrapped these days.
Yeah.
Like, don't get hurt, don't go in the dirt, don't do this, right? It's like the parents are having more anxiety.
Yeah.
So I think the kids end up absorbing a lot of their parents' anxiety.
Yeah. That's
Right?
a good point.
Because kids are like sponges. They don't know how to separate themselves from the parents.
Yeah.
Right? So at a younger age, the parents are anxious. They're like, oh my God, there could be a stranger that might come and take my kid. Or there might be, they might get an infection playing in the dirt. They're going to bring all this dirt into the house. I'm going to have to clean it later.
I know.
Right? So that comes up. Or there's like the idea of maybe if a kid goes in sports, maybe the kid might get injured or hurt. I know. So we end up scaring the kids. Some parents even scare their kids not to even playing sports, right? Right? It's like, it seems to me there's a lot of
It's
fear.
almost like a fear-based culture we've created.
It's a very fear-based culture. Our whole culture is fear-based. You look at the news cycle, like I could watch mainstream media, and it seems that the mainstream media I watch is all about fear, right? There's fear everywhere. Even yesterday, I watched the most dumbest thing on TV yesterday. It was on A&D. It was about road rage incidents.
Oh,
and I am sitting there, and I'm like,
Those have gone up.
yeah. I've been
crazy.
I've been watching this, and I'm like,
I love.
and it's okay to watch, but they had a marathon off it yesterday, right? So it could episode after episode talking about road rage, and I'm sitting there. If I'm watching this all day, I'm thinking to myself, it might be scary on the road. Who knows what the guy next to me might do, or the guy behind me might do?
Yeah, there's some psychos out there, though.
Yeah.
There are some people who are unable to control their feelings or their emotions, and they have poor emotional management. And they're on the road. There definitely is that, right?
But when you watch it on TV, it's creating more fear and anxiety in you.
100%
Because that's what our society is feeding us.
Yeah,
right?
that's what we're being fed all the time. Be afraid, be afraid, and I think that's one of the things that we end up, even as adults,
we're taking that in.
We take that in. There's like even I don't even look at anxiety amongst kids. I even look at anxiety amongst our parents.
Yeah.
They're looking at society being more like I'm in my 40s now, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes if I'm not home from work by a certain time, my dad will give me a call.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I get that. But thing is, I'm a man. I can take care of myself. If something goes wrong, I can call. And you're a woman. You can, if something goes wrong, you can call.
Yeah.
Like they have created a schedule for me in their head that if something doesn't go right according to the schedule, they're thinking something could be wrong with them, right? Because they are.
That happened the other day, right?
Yeah, they've created some mentality that society is dangerous. Like, you know what I mean?
I know.
And I think the anxiety is not so much just in our kids. I think it's in a term that our kids are getting labeled with a lot.
Yeah,
and I think some of them are getting mislabeled with a lot. I think sometimes it is that when kids have any feeling that they're experiencing, rather than taking time and working with the child to label that feeling, we just label it as anxiety. You're having anxiety.
Or we just run away from it.
Run away from it, exactly.
So Ronnie, what do we do about it? What should we do about it? For our, like you, I mean, I said a few things, carve out time, but what are some practical things we can, like skills we can offer that can help with some of this, right? Because I feel like it's just on the rise and it'll only get worse.
I think that's such an individual-based question.
Yeah.
It's like, ideally, I like to wave a magic wand and create a better society. Right?
Society is the problem.
The society is the problem. And I would definitely recommend that everybody pick up The Myth of Normal by Dr. Mate.
Oh.
It's a great book.
I think you've mentioned that, but I haven't seen that one.
A Myth of Normal. It talks about how sick our culture is. We live in a sick culture these days.
Yeah.
It's everything is just sick.
Well, and I saw a video on, actually, Dr. Mate, he was talking about how autoimmune diseases are very common in women, because we were talking about, I mean, autoimmunity is really just your own body starts attacking you, right? Mm-hmm. And so where does that come from? And why do women more likely have autoimmunity, right? It's really interesting. His video is really interesting because it speaks to society.
It definitely does.
The society and the women's role in society and the pressure on women and how the stress actually makes their bodies attack themselves. Isn't that fascinating?
That is fascinating.
Not in a good way,
Yeah.
but fascinating in the sense that we can explain it to some degree, like MS, all these different diseases women harbor. You know, it's a real thing, what stress can do to your body.
It can. It's almost like the white blood cells start attacking cortisol.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They're looking at itself as the enemy.
Yeah.
And then that's what causes a lot of autoimmune disorders.
Yeah.
I just think that our society
myth of normal.
our society really needs, I think, generally speaking, this is what happens even in politics, for an example. I look at all of our politicians, federally and provincially. None of them seem to have any vision these days,
Yeah.
right? And I watched a recent interview with Dr. Vijay Prashad. He's a political scientist. And he was talking about vision. What's the end goal for our society?
Yeah.
Do we value our children? Do we value each other? Do we value ourselves? Or do we just look at ourselves as commodities,
Right.
as products? And I think the fact is, like, I think a lot of things that have gone on in society have taken away from our own humanity. I think there's a lot of inhumane things going on in the world. Right? I look at this recent stuff with Puff Daddy. I look at the recent wars which are going on in the world. There's no humanity left,
there's
right?
not, yeah.
It's all about who makes the most money. And if you're a child watching this, you're thinking to yourself, like, I could think of myself as a child, even as an adult or an older person. I'm watching this, I'm thinking to myself, where's the love? Like,
Yeah,
generally speaking,
there's no love and respect left.
100%.
Good point.
And I think the inverse of anxiety is love.
Yeah.
And I think
we don't have that.
loving people. And I think the way that our society is created, it's not structured to create love. It's just structured to make you more afraid of stuff.
I know.
And I remember, like, thinking, like, love will
Override.
always conquer fear.
Fear. Yeah.
Right? And I think that we don't have enough love in society. Like, love for each other. Like,
Or just compassion.
Compassion,
even, right?
yeah.
Like, I remember,
Like-
I'll say to patients sometimes, like, can you just come from a place of compassion, peace, and love? And they're kind of like, huh? Like, what? Because that's in conflict. Think about it. Are we coming from a place of love, peace, and compassion? Well, no. And but it's really hard for people even at baseline to do that on a daily basis, right?
It definitely is,
Like,
right?
we've talked about Punjabis throwing other Punjabis down. Like, that's not compassion.
It isn't. I just look at humanity in general. We just throw each other down.
general, yeah.
Right?
We don't do that anymore.
We don't, like, where's the love even for ourselves, right? Like, I think one thing nowadays is we're so self-critical.
Yeah.
Like, we have created these ideas of perfection. And when we're unable to be perfect, we become anxious. It's like, I'm not perfect, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what Brené Brown will talk about in her book, with The Gifts of Imperfection. She speaks about that. I think people are so focused on being perfect,
That
like,
creates more.
anxiety. Like, I have to have the perfect body. I gotta have the perfect bank account. I gotta have the perfect house. I gotta have the perfect style.
Especially in Punjabis, actually. I was
Yes,
watching
that
the
is
video.
true.
Oh, and we drive ourselves into the
Well,
ground.
Punjabis are especially
I agree with
very
that.
competitive.
We just talked
the
about
compete
you
levels-
sent me something today on that. Yeah.
Yeah, like the compete level with Punjabis is just out the roof.
Yeah.
Like, if you're not driving a really nice car, it's judged right away.
Yeah.
And that's just how Punjabis are like that.
Even
like,
weddings. Like, have you seen our weddings?
Even the
Our
weddings.
weddings are always crazy, and I think that creates a whole other example, right? Like,
Like, oh, if they did
Well-
it like this, let's do it like this.
Well, this guy on Instagram, he's like, Punjabi, especially in India, they'll have these, and even here, they'll have these huge weddings, and it's just to feed people
yeah.
food that they're
that
gonna
was
complain about
stellar.
anyways.
Yeah, that was a great
So
video.
everybody, like, you invite 200 people, let's say, everybody's complaining about something, but you invited these people, you spent like 20, 30 lakh, and at the end of the day, you could have taken that money, given it to like the other side, like the girl side, done something for them in their life instead of just throwing a huge party. And even these people don't have a lot of money. They'll sell land to get the daughters
to
married.
to do
and
the
then,
party.
And then the party, everybody's complaining. They didn't get there on time.
Well,
the
and
food wasn't good.
I think it was that video that was talking about, like, now, we used to do wedding cards. And now the trend is wedding card de naal dabba,
Yeah.
mithaiyan.
Mithaiyan.
We're doing laddus with the invite. And I'm just like, even my wedding, 7 years ago, we didn't do that. It was just a card.
And
Lots of ego, right?
Those
But now all
dabbe,
of a
man,
sudden
they're
those
expensive.
dabbe, and those dabbe are
They're
so
expensive.
extravagant, and oh my God, the amount of money people spend on the dabba. I'm just like,
And
that
people don't care. People don't care.
people don't care.
That goes on to your ego. It's like, I got to show the community I got money around wealth
'Cause
and
my
I'm
dabba
successful,
cost,
right?
yeah.
So essentially, it's like we end up having almost like a collective ego, right?
Yeah.
I call it, right? Or collective anxiety. We got to make sure
Yeah.
this wedding is so
True.
perfect that when people come, they're going to be like, this is great. And you know, one thing I find really interesting about our community is this. You'll see people who aren't Punjabi, like white people or Filipino people or black people or indigenous people, anybody that comes to our weddings, they'll say, man,
They're
Yeah.
like, what the
you
heck's
guys,
going on here?
you guys have an amazing, your weddings are just the bomb.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
crazier,
yeah.
right? Rather than, and they say, man, you guys are really loud too during your weddings.
Yeah.
Rather than saying, as a community, maybe we can tone it down a little bit. We don't have to be loud. We're like, the next wedding, we're gonna show you how loud we could really get.
be.
So we
We'll
get
take
even
it up a notch.
We get even louder, right? It's like when somebody comes to us, says, somebody comes to me from outside the community, and like, so I went to an Indian wedding. It was so extravagant. You're like, you thought that wedding was extravagant. Wait till you see my wedding.
Yeah.
It's going to be even more extravagant.
Yeah.
Right.
Like I think what we try to do is we try to one up
One up
the
yes.
last wedding.
Yes.
Right.
Or anything. One up anything. The house, the car,
Everything.
the career, the family. I mean, the list just goes on and on, right?
I used to joke when I was younger that when I got married, I was gonna come to my wedding like Aladdin. I thought I was always gonna. I used to tell my parents. I used to be like, when I get married, I'm gonna come on an ati, just like this, arms crossed, and I'm gonna be like, yeah, that's the man. You know what I mean? And I was with a big bug and everything. That was the vision, right?
That was the vision.
I think about that now. I'm like, that was a pretty silly vision.
I know.
But somebody who is probably listening to this right now might be thinking to themselves and saying, hey, that's pretty cool. Maybe I will do that.
Maybe I'll do that.
For my wedding.
Are we going to talk about some of the cases that he saw?
Oh yeah. What have you seen? We were going to talk a little bit about what have you seen? Anything different or new? What have you seen the last couple of weeks in the community?
Well, I would say this, like, I'm finding that parents are having challenges setting limits, right? And I think limits with their adult children. And
Adult children,
an
okay.
adult boys more than anything else.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that is one of the challenges I'm observing is that
And I see that all the time.
Yeah, the inability to say no to a child, or you get to a point of complete exhaustion where you have to say no to the child, and that becomes anxiety provoking in itself, right? I am anxious about the fact that I have to tell my son no. Could you come? And they always say, help me say no to him.
But is that out of fear, you think? Because I've heard about a lot of Punjabi guys getting violent with their parents.
Yeah, so hearing
their
no.
parents don't, and I have friends that are in police who
Yeah.
are like, all we go to is
these
your
homes.
people's
Yeah.
houses, and a lot of the time it's domestic violence, either the guy and the wife or the
Or the guy
parents
and
and
the
the
parents.
son. So that's something that maybe they're scared of. Like if they say no, what is he gonna do?
Well, I think that
So
goes
what do we
back to
do?
the
Yeah.
last topic we've talked about when we talked about the idea of disappointment, right?
Yeah, I remember you saying these guys can't hear no.
Yeah, the guys can't hear no. The first time you hear no, I think it's only natural that a person will flip out, right? And I just think that's where another piece of anxiety comes from within our parents is our parents do not want to disappoint their kids, so they never say no. So that they're always anxious in that sense, like, okay, now son wants this, I'm going to work a little bit harder to get my son that.
So what do you tell your people? Let's just say like.
So what do we do? Yeah.
What have you
Start
told
saying
them?
no in childhood,
Yeah.
first of all.
Well-
But if we get to that young adult who's in his 20s and who can't hear no, what do you do?
Well,
Start saying no and then call the police?
Well, I think unfortunately
You
at
have
this
to say
point,
no.
unfortunately at this point, you say no and you bear the consequences. And if somebody gets violent or if somebody becomes really disrespectful or belligerent, the only option I think nowadays, unfortunately, our mental health services in the city are not equipped to go out and deal
Yes.
with that situation, because if they are violent, mental health services are not going to come out. They're going to say, call the police.
Call the police, yeah.
And I think, and de facto, I think this feeds the police. This is part of their job now.
That's their job.
They're coming in to enforce rules that were not previously enforced before. I just think it's more of a lesson to younger parents who have younger kids.
say no.
It's
Yeah.
important to say no. It's important to disappoint. It's important to say no, because if a kid learns that there's no, the kid will become creative in a different sense, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, if this isn't no, what can I do to make it a yes, right? And I think it also creates a lot more adaptability. If a kid's adaptable, the kid becomes flexible, and I think those are skills that a lot of young men in our Punjabi community don't have these days.
Yeah. It
They're
was
not-
really interesting. Someone said this to me the other day in the community, like a therapist, a social worker, occupational therapist doing more mental health work with kids. And it was really interesting. She goes, you have to let your child have the feeling. So when we discipline, we say no, right? And then they start crying and, just give it to them because they're crying now. They learn that crying gets me what I want, right?
And you also realize it makes you uncomfortable.
Exactly. So she's like, she was telling this to parents and kids, to the parents, you have to be uncomfortable and you have to be okay being uncomfortable for the parent.
Yeah.
But then she's like, you also have to let your kid have the feeling of being embarrassed, of being disciplined, and being uncomfortable with those feelings. You can't shelter them from hearing no. You can't shelter them from being embarrassed.
Definitely not.
No, because
And-
you have to let them have those experiences. Otherwise, you're creating that like, what did you say? Bubble wrap.
Bubble wrap,
The
right?
bubble wrapped kid.
And even what you talked about earlier was with the parent feeling uncomfortable. So the parent is experiencing anxiety there.
Oh, I know.
Right? If you
Oh,
think
I go
about
through
it,
that, yeah.
right? Parents are like, oh my God, am I going to look like a bad mom? Am I going to look
Yeah.
that?
You like
Because
second guess yourself.
Because the image nowadays is there's all these great parents, and if your kid is crying in public, or if your kid is feeling humiliated in public or whatever,
Oh, I know.
you can sit there and process those feelings
Yes.
about humiliation and embarrassment afterwards, after the kid has gone through them, or even while the kid's going through them. I'm pretty sure this doesn't feel very good and stuff, right? But the thing is, I think parents are under this pressure to be perfect as well.
Mm-hmm.
So if a parent feels that they have so much pressure to be perfect, they're going to do whatever it takes to avoid embarrassment themselves.
Yeah.
If I have to discipline my kid, that means I am a failure as a parent
I know.
in public.
But
You
that's
know
not
what I
true,
mean?
yeah.
That's not true.
But that's not true.
But
yeah.
that's the image.
And that's what we're thinking, though. That's what we're doing.
Yeah, that's the image. That's the narrative that's been established.
It's really interesting.
Very
yeah.
interesting.
If you
Yeah.
think about that, right?
we put ourselves down for disciplining our child. It's
Yeah.
like what we were saying, we're walking on eggshells around our kids now because we're so whatever. It's so different than when we grew up, right?
Yeah.
It's just different.
Or you create like a precedence of how to discipline your kid.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? If a kid is acting out, and then if you know that you could take a kid aside every single time that happens, even telling your kid, if a kid's acting out, okay, we got to go somewhere to talk, the kid will know right away, this is serious.
Yeah.
Right? Like, for an example, I know Baldev Mutta in Toronto gave an example. Every time this one kid acted out in a home, the parents would say, okay, we're going to go for a talk.
Oh.
We're going to take you out to a fast food joint. The kid will go out. The kid's looking for the fast food.
Oh.
But generally speaking, that's when the parent will talk to the kid about the misbehavior.
Yeah.
The parent had the financial means, though, to be able to
do
afford the
it.
fast food, right?
Yeah.
So the kid knows in the future, when the parent goes, I got to take you for a talk. Oh, no, I don't want to go to fast food because I know we're going to have that talk.
Yeah.
You know? It's more like...
It's also building communication pathways.
communication, right?
Yeah.
So I just think that that's something to really kind of...
I think unpacking feelings in the moment is really important. I find that with, at least personally as a parent, I find that it's really key.
Yeah.
You don't wait till the end of the day or just another day. You just unpack them right there. It happened at the Gurdwara a couple of weeks ago with my kid, and I just took her to the side and I says, what happened back there? Like, let's just try to figure it out, right? And let's try to figure it out, meaning it's not all on you.
Yeah.
This is a team.
It's a team, yeah.
Yeah.
And the kid knows I can rely on mom,
yeah.
and I can rely on dad, and they're able to let me know what it is that I'm experiencing.
And help me work through it.
Yeah, right? So let's say if I am experiencing humiliation, you could be saying to the kids, like, man, this is so humiliating. I can't believe everybody's watching us right now.
I know.
Right? And the kid being like, wow, even though she knows it, even though she is the one dishing out discipline,
Yeah.
she's also the one showing compassion at
For
the
the
same
embarrassing
time.
moment.
The embarrassing moment, yeah. And I think that just alone develops a whack load of resiliency.
Yeah. And it creates identification of feelings, which helps us maybe not just label everything, just blanket as anxiety, right? Going back to
Definitely
how we started this
and
conversation.
I think our society needs to be better educated too, because you will see parents giving other parents disapproving looks.
I know.
When they see a kid crying and
I know.
and that kind of stuff,
About how
right?
you're parenting, right?
Right. And so there's the piece about love and compassion in society.
Yeah.
And rather than me saying, looking at you, you're having a situation with your daughter, and I see you discipline her and she starts crying, rather than me going looking like giving you a scowl or one of those moments, it's nice if I could just be able to say, wow, it must have been very challenging for the mom to like really.
Oh, you don't even see that these days.
You know, it must have been really challenging.
Unheard
People
of.
people
Support
don't
is
do
not
that, right?
yeah.
And as soon as you hear a kid crying, you're like, WTF, why can't that mom get her kid under control?
Yeah.
You know, why can't that dad get his kid under control? You know, we get to that point a lot faster, rather than saying, wow, that mom and dad must be really having a challenging time getting the kid under control. I wonder what's wrong with the kid. Having some compassionate inquiry. I don't think we even have that as adults.
It's true.
Yeah, and I think, you know, just sort of, we spoke about a lot of stuff today, and then just wrapping it up, I think the compassion piece, even in our community, like you see a lot of Punjabis throwing other Punjabis under the bus, or just not even supporting. Again, it comes back to there's not a lot of peace and compassion there. There's just more ego.
Jinnah see, I think that Punjabis are very like a community and all this stuff.
Yeah,
it's very
we've
much
lost that
it's
ability.
the polar opposite almost.
It's opposite, yeah.
Because what we preach isn't what we actually practice. It's a
We
totally
don't.
different thing.
I absolutely agree with that. I think practicing what you preach, walking your talk, is so much more challenging than sitting here and just talking the talk and not necessarily walking the walk that the old saying goes, right?
Yeah.
But generally speaking, I think developing community in this community is very challenging. I think there's a lot of reasons for that as well too, and we can explore it in the future. I just think that there's been so many different waves of immigration and so many different eras. Like our parents immigrated here in the 70s to Canada. Like comparing their journey compared to my friends whose parents immigrated here in the 90s or in the 2000s, they've experienced Canada very differently in the last like 5-6 decades, right? So every decade you experience Canada very differently, and you experience like the racism very differently. And I always find it humorous when people who immigrated here in the 70s say life was more harder for them than people who are immigrating here now. Each generation has its own unique challenges, right? And I think that's something that could be explored in a future podcast.
It's a great, that's a great topic
That would be
too.
a good topic,
Right?
yeah.
And I just
have some actually parents from different sides.
That would be interesting.
One from the 70s, one from the 90s.
who immigrated to Canada at
2010.
different times, right? And I
Yeah,
just
you get to
think,
kind of have those two different viewpoints.
Yeah, because it's a real big generation to
it's
generation.
yeah,
gap,
100%.
right?
There's like 5 generations in there, right?
Yeah.
I think the first Punjabis in Winnipeg were here in 1960s, right?
Late
Our
60s,
dad was
yeah.
early 70s,
70s.
Yeah, right. So late 60s was the first time any Punjabi person immigrated to Winnipeg, and their experience in Winnipeg will be
Compared
far
to-
different than the Punjabi person immigrating in 2024.
Oh,
Night and day. That's episode 12.
Yeah,
Thank you so
it's
much.
good.
So, again, follow us on Instagram at Punjabi Pod. We'll put the links up. Thank you, Rooney, for coming. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you, Dr.
And email
Sandhu.
us questions.
Yeah, questions, comments.
Things you guys have that you want to talk about. Ask anonymously. We'll answer them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thanks.